The workplace as we know it is going through a period of significant change in response to a shift in the way organisations and employees work. The creation of a digital hybrid workplace can break down communication barriers, transform the employee experience, enable growth and innovation, and promote efficiency. It also supports businesses achieve their sustainability ambitions and reduce their environmental impact. At the same time, offices remain vitally important in enabling face-to-face connection and creative collaboration. We build relationships, collaborate, and learn from each other best in person, knowing that innovation happens most readily when ideas flow freely and collide. So as we all embrace hybrid working, an adaptable employee experience that brings people together is more important than ever, be it in person or virtually. Done right, the digital hybrid workplace can enhance connection, increase flexibility, and expand opportunities for learning and growth to create a more inclusive and equitable employee experience. Today, I am pleased to be joined by three leaders in digital workplaces and buildings of the future. Louise Munger, Vice President of Digital Buildings at Schneider Electric, Max Davies, Director of Enterprise and Federal Government Markets at Crestron, and Anton Schiavello, Managing Director of Neurospace. They join me to share their thoughts on the role technology and data are playing in enhancing the employee experience in a hybrid world and how the digital workplace can improve sustainability outcomes. Welcome to you all, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
So let's kick off with a question to each of you to start with. So it feels like, or we are, at a point of inflection right now in how we work. How will workplace technology support that shift while sustaining corporate culture in a hybrid world? And I might start with you, Louise.
Yeah, thank you. So when I think about that inflection point, for me, there are two themes that come to mind. The first is how hybrid work is really changing the nature of the office. So the office is not a place where people come to type emails, but a place of that corporate culture, the heartbeat of the organisation, and where people will come to get that connection to both the organisation and their colleagues. The second macro theme is generational change in the workplace. So by 2025, the median of the Australian workforce will be millennials, with a larger proportion of Gen Z, whereas in 2015, the median was Generation X. So what does that mean about expectations for technology? Millennials and Gen Z have grown up with technology in their hands. They like it on demand, it's seamless, and it's very, very personalised. So when we look at these two themes, hybrid work, taking the workplace as this centre of connection, and then the changing generations, I think technology is going to play a huge role in shaping that overall experience. And that's going to be a game changer for organisations because it's going to lead to the war on talent that we know that everyone's fighting for all these, generations. And it's going to be that employee experience and technology that helps to achieve that.
Great. And Anton, did you want to build on that?
Yeah, not a problem. It's very interesting, sort of post-COVID or post-pandemic, we're really starting to see sort of a redefinition of the workplace. And, there's a significant move from sort of individual-based working to, team-based working. And of course, that's having a significant impact on businesses, how they're approaching the workplace and how, the sort of hybrid working model can work to support its people and their objectives. And so it's really interesting seeing, how technology and in Neurospace's case, how we're able to support businesses in managing that, and supporting, of course, the actual end users themselves. This is a sort of a crucial, time for us and as well as everybody. I'm sure people are experiencing it, quite significantly. And it's very interesting because a business and an organisation it's a living, moving organism. There's so many different components that make up a business, and people are at the very, very core of it. It's the heart. So we're there supporting those changes.
Certainly people at the core resonates with me. Max, your perspective?
I think it's been fascinating and really exciting to see the amount of change that has happened over the past couple of years. And somebody much wiser than me said that we've seen 10 years worth of change in 2 years, and it's an incredible thing to witness. I think as we all sort of sat at home watching the world sort of unfold or fold up as it did, we all sort of didn't quite realise what we were witnessing. But when we come out of the lockdowns and the change and the hybrid working environments that we started to see, it's a point in time that we'll talk about forever, and I think it's a really exciting time that technology has come of age. We find that we're front and centre now in the discussions that we're at. The fact that, and I'm very pleased to sit on this panel with my sort of peers in this industry, whereas previously we probably wouldn't have been connected having this discussion together, but we're now seen as a sort of a homogenous connection of people and technology that sort out these problems that we're seeing every day in the move to hybrid working. So that's what sort of really excites me about the way we're seeing at the moment. So that change has really driven all of that.
Yeah, it did feel like 10 years of change. Yes. I can attest to that. Louise, how can a digital building help businesses not only reduce costs, but also really lead to positive, sustainable outcomes?
Yeah. So if we think about a digital building, what we're essentially talking about now is connected assets and connected devices. And it's the ability to harness the data from all of those connected devices into an integration layer. So bringing together what were previously siloed OT systems into enterprise systems to create workflows and leverage operational efficiency. And I actually like that idea of like this panel as a metaphor for that, because we're actually seeing groups of people that would have been in those silos now working together on new developments to create these great opportunities. So if we think about a connected asset, what's a connected asset? It's a hardware device. It could be a circuit breaker in a switchboard. It could be a sensor in a meeting room. It might be a screen that's providing wayfinding in the lobby. Of course, all of your, heating and ventilation and air conditioning devices. But the ability to bring those devices together is where we're going to see that opportunity for hyper efficiency. And efficiency in two ways. Firstly is obviously energy efficiency and making the building run as optimally as possible. But the second one is actually how can we manage this building or portfolio of buildings with the least amount of resources as possible. So taking cars off the road, less maintenance costs, less cleaning chemicals, less of everything. And in terms of like cleaning, a good example would be on-demand cleaning for a retail space that may have been used heavily or lightly, or an office space or floor that wasn't used, particular floor that afternoon because of hybrid work and people were out of the office. But then we look at what are the technologies that can support that energy reduction. And I think this is where we get to see the cool stuff like artificial intelligence and machine learning come into play with, the big data of all these connected assets. Artificial intelligence, I think, is going to play a greater and greater role in the operation of buildings. And to give you some examples, like what does it mean AI is going to be controlling my building? But it's actually as simple as making your building be proactive rather than reactive. So a traditional HVAC system, a BMS system, might be reacting to the set points that somebody sets on the wall or the outside air temperature, but because it's reacting, it's only reacting just in time. So it's actually taking more energy to drive the building to that set point as the temperature gets higher or colder as it may be. What AI has the ability to do is to feed data sets into that to actually predict with a reasonable level of accuracy what that temperature needs to be in 2 or 3 hours' time and proactively control the building there before that. So we can save up to 10 to 30% of energy just by doing that. And there's some really cool data sets that can be brought in. In a retail case, it might be using Google Analytics and the smart, the busy times that you see when you search a business. But it could be as simple as importing that sort of data that enables the AI to predict that. The other one is machine learning. So machine learning is actually taking learnings from systems that are installed all over the world, a similar system, and starting to look for patterns of behaviour on this equipment. And instead of a person going around to say, that's faulty or someone complaining because it got hot, it says, we can tell with a reasonable level of accuracy that that's about to fail, and we can dedicate those maintenance hours to fixing only those things that are failing, rather than waiting for those comfort conditions to decline and someone creating an alarm. So a great outcome for customer experience there as well.
Yeah, great outcome. And you can see how, the positive impact the sum of all those parts will have on our environment. So super impactful. What are some of the other benefits, I guess, that we can realise from a sort of smarter and more connected building?
I think the big one we learned, particularly in the last few years, is resilience. And, resilience can mean many things, but to me it's the ability for a building or a piece of infrastructure to withstand external changes and influences. And of course, a pandemic is a great example of that. But, there's other things. There's climate change, weather events, the new energy landscape, and we've seen a lot in the markets at the moment about the stability or otherwise of the energy market. So actually, how can technology help buildings and assets be much more resilient? And the big learning from COVID were organisations, companies, landlords that had invested in technology, the infrastructure, not necessarily needing to predict what are all the use cases and how do we respond to everything? But if you've got a good level of infrastructure in your buildings, you're much more able to sit down and say, okay, this has happened. How can we adopt a use case around that? And we saw that with COVID, with remote operations and, centralising into command centres and being able to control things without sending people to site. So that investment paid off in dividends for those companies. And I think more and more we'll be able to see that flexibility and that response to resilience if you've got a good level of base infrastructure, not needing to predict the world, because none of us can do that.
No, I don't think so. I think the world has proven us that over the last couple of years. So I guess just from a health and well-being perspective, I imagine there's some real benefits that come from having a sort of smarter and more connected building. Can you share a little bit about what's happening in that space?
So two things come to mind. The first one, the big ticket item, is all about air quality. So again, a bit of a fallout from the pandemic and people and employees and organisations wanting peace of mind about fresh air and circulation and things like that. But I actually think we saw this trend pre-pandemic and the rise of well rating schemes and other things, knowing the link between air quality and productivity, that organisations were already moving towards that. Now, the real-time monitoring of air quality is going to have a huge benefit for organisations, because if you look at how we used to check air quality, would be engaging a consultant to come around once every 6 months who would take some samples at a point in time that would give you some information to respond to, but knowing that air quality actually changes every day. There could be bushfires, there could be pollution. So how can we actually have better and more quality real-time data to respond to that, to understand CO2, VOC levels and so on? And then it's the ability to democratise that information. HR can have a look at that dashboard. Facility management can. There may be a decision taken to actually share that with all building occupants to give them that peace of mind. So moving to real-time collection of air quality data, I think, has huge dividends, because we're able to respond much more quickly and take actions depending on what that information is telling us.
And are you also seeing the quality of natural light? Are you able to measure that in the workplace as well?
Natural light, acoustics is another thing. So measuring a whole range of things that would impact employee productivity and being able to take actions and measure in response to
real
that.
time. Great. So talking about acoustics, Max, beyond the connected building, what trends are you seeing in the AV space in terms of how people are connecting to enable an equitable and inclusive experience for our people?
It's interesting, and I would challenge the beyond statements, because we are part of the connected building. So I say we, so Crestron's a global organisation that deals with workplace technology, and we have seen a massive shift in the way that people consume technology and the way that we collaborate. And we saw people were sort of predicting the death of the meeting room when COVID happened, because everybody was going back to work and those type of things. But in our world, we saw a massive amount of uplift in terms of what people were requiring. but the requirements around meeting rooms and technologies and the way they connect into the building was really crucial. And that became really apparent that we're no longer just a meeting room technology that sits within a building. We're part of the technology that sits within that building. We're connected to it. But with technologies like IoT, we're now able to leverage, as Louise says, less people managing this technology, because we've seen a marked increase, almost 200% of meeting rooms compared to what we used to see. People are having more meetings, they want more meeting rooms. And interestingly, when we look at the connected building, don't forget the meeting room is so critical to that, because it might be the only reason you actually go to work anymore, because we've got so many organisations now are saying, we don't want to see you in the office anymore. But we know that culturally we need to bring people back into the workplace. That's not been without its challenges. I think we've all been experienced of sitting in boardrooms, for example, sitting at home looking at a boardroom and seeing a sea of faces staring back at us that we don't particularly recognise. We're sort of squinting to see who these people are. So we're doing a lot of work with our partners, and we've partnered with some really cool camera companies like Jabra and Huddly and those sort of people. We even bought a camera company recently because we saw the benefits of AI and the way that they were looking at how to capture faces in a meeting room, for example, and make sure that people can see that. So again, it's all coming back to this technology driving the change and making sure that we have the best experience and giving the equitable experience for everybody. So and there's been a massive shift. We're seeing a huge amount of changes for people adopting certain platforms like Microsoft Teams and Zoom have become the prevalent thing here, which is great. Those organizations themselves are actually driving change themselves, and they're driving it so quickly. One of the really big things that we've seen, to give you an example, Microsoft released 16 updates last year, and every one of those was a new feature. Now, in past times, we'd have been scared of adopting those features, but now we want to see the new feature, the transcription, the AI, the facial recognition, and those type of things. We're excited by that. So we're changing the way that we perceive a meeting as well around all of that.
I mean, certainly we had such a good experience when we were working from home, and so coming back into the office,
That's right.
there were some challenges.
That's right.
When we were trying to blend, the virtual and the in-office experience. So, what sort of are some of the other things you're looking at? I know facial, obviously, recognition is a key part, but is there acoustics and the lighting? And
it's interesting how all of this becomes really important now, because we realise that when we're sat at home, we're sat in front of a big screen, we have a microphone, and we have a very good experience. And so what we're trying to do with our partners is to replicate that experience. So to make sure that all faces in a meeting room can be seen, for example, is a really critical part of that. And it's interesting, we talk about the resiliency level, but the organisations that had adopted cloud technologies and meeting room technologies that were flexible before all of the change to COVID had really been the ones that had benefited the most from that as they came out of that and started returning to work. So interestingly, a lot of the organisations that we work with and all the big names in the globe weren't that hardly hit by the change to hybrid working, because they already had those technologies in place. And because those technologies by their very nature are hardware as a service, software driven devices, it was easy for people to adapt and to change that. Now we just have to look at the building they're in and make sure that that's suitable for working in the future.
But that's fit for purpose as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So if we look forward, what's next in terms of the meeting room experience in the AV space? I assume there's a lot of innovation that's happening in this space. So I'd love to hear what's bleeding edge? When could we expect, virtual reality or holograms to become mainstream? So talk to us about what's coming, what's cool.
It's an interesting question, and I think initially we've all seen the vision of the future, the Tomorrow's World or the Star Trek or that sort of thing, and I think we almost don't stop and look around and realise how far we've come. Because if we look again, as I mentioned before, if we look back 5 years, we wouldn't have dreamed that we'd have all had a personal meeting room technology in our home. We could meet anywhere. We could really sort of change the way that we work. A lot of our clients, for example, the ones who do a lot of sort of client-facing activities in their client meeting rooms and those type of things, interestingly want to do all of the things they did pre-COVID with the Zoom or the Teams now as well. So we're finding that no excuses are allowed anymore when it comes to those sort of spaces. So we're looking at clients who want to do client experience that would always have remote people involved in those type of things. But interestingly, and Louise made this point as well, we've got so much technology now but there aren't the people to drive it anymore. So critical to this are IoT technologies, cloud-based monitoring and service platforms, data, and more data, because we really need to know how this is being used, and try to predict how we're going to be using it in 3 to 4 years' time, again, because we can't predict how this is going to go. We know it's moving quickly. We know the technology needs to be put in place that allows us to do that. And we've partnered with the best in the globe to make sure that we can be as dynamic as we need to be. So, for example, if you do need another piece of technology in your meeting room, we can integrate that really quickly in, and we can give you the data to tell you what it's doing, how it's working, and if people want to use it, or even how they've used it. So that's the bleeding edge, I think, of where we're going. It's about the resiliency, the flexibility, and giving us options as we go into the future.
So no holograms?
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it. I tell you what, we see a lot more video walls than we ever used to, I tell you, because the price has dropped. But I haven't quite seen a hologram yet. But, give it 2 years. I reckon it'll be here.
I'm sure we will. So obviously, we'll come back to the data point. That seems to be a really strong theme, along with artificial intelligence. So Anton, we heard from Louise earlier about how Schneider is providing analytics to help businesses make real-time decisions about their buildings. How can we use data to enhance the employee experience?
Yeah, well, Louise, as you rightly so put it, there's a lot more data, coming in these days from very, very, sort of a significant array of physical hardware as well as sort of software inputs. And that's allowing businesses to make, faster and smarter decisions, which is building the resilience, the business resilience. From an individual perspective, we're able to take these data, inputs, of which we're getting more and more of them, which is fantastic, and build a personalized experience. So we're able to take inputs from, say MS Teams, Microsoft Teams, which are the colleagues that you're chatting with most. And we're able to pull that together and understand, potentially what your preferences are, when are you most active, on Outlook, where are your meetings taking place, where and who are those teams and those individuals that you're working with, and essentially build a sort of a future forecast of what that pattern might look like, which then assists us to stack buildings, to suggest and understand, how many people might be coming in next week, and on which days of the week of the week are the sort of more popular days. If we understand that Mondays and Fridays are the least used days in the workplace, which I think is widely understood, then let's shut down a floor and let's push people into 2 of the 3 floors that maybe are being made available. Which, to Louise's point, that might give us the opportunity to, maybe not run the HVAC on those days, or, suggest to the cleaners maybe not to clean, excessively on those floors that are underutilized. And that can, continuously be, updated, which is essentially creating the dynamic workplace. It's essentially the workplace evolving and moving around the inputs of data from individuals, all sort of wrapped within the, preferences of the organisation.
So maybe talk a little bit more about the personalisation and the dynamic workplace.
Yeah, sure.
And how are you seeing that play out in your product specifically?
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to exploring that actually a lot further with, with sort of ideas around developing and creating almost an airline or hotel-like booking experience. And I use the word booking, but call it reservation. The future could look like, individuals not making bookings at all, but essentially the, Neurospace creating the bookings for them, and presenting those bookings, and those users either accepting them or declining them on the day. And those inputs are coming from, that large selection of both sort of physical and software-based, data inputs. And what that's allowing us to do is it's allowing us to stack the floor plan, as I was saying previously, and build the floor, with the right teams, with the right, utilization that the organisation is seeking. And so we're ensuring that people are in the right, in the right areas with the right meeting rooms and their colleagues, potentially the ones that they'd like to sit near, or, if there's preferences, it could be a mixed match, allowing, some diversification in teams as well. So, there's a significant amount of opportunity for us moving forward to create a very unique and different experience in the workplace.
Terrific. Annalise, I might come back to you then, just in the theme of data, and I know that you have done some work on real-time decision making and automation based on real-time occupancy data. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so when we think about real-time decision making from occupancy data, we're really looking at rules-based scenarios. So if this, then that, and the ability to automatically scale up or down operations depending on those scenarios. So some good examples, I think Anton talked to one, is obviously hybrid work. There's certain floors, only 1 or 2 people on a floor. How can we, through the integration of enterprise systems and those OT systems, actually consolidate those people on a Friday to a certain number of floors? That integration might also go into the wayfinding for the building. So when they arrive, they're being presented on a screen, floors 4 and 5 are open today, please head there. It could be in their occupant experience app or as they go to book a space. That's a really obvious one. Some other obvious ones are around meeting rooms. So increasing the fresh air when there's a large occupancy. But I actually like the opposite of that, which is nobody turned up to this meeting. There's no one in this room after 10 minutes and shutting it down, right? So using that scale, that efficiency. But it might also send an alert to facilities management to say, hey, we've got a repeat offender here that books a room and that space isn't being utilised. So how can organisations get a better handle on how that space is being used and potentially misused, right? So that's not efficient. And another great example would be maybe counting people in a public space like at a concierge desk. So there's one person at a desk and 4 or 5 people milling about waiting. That could automatically send a notification to another receptionist in another part of the building, another floor, to attend to that desk without the concierge having to stop and call somebody and ask for help. So we can start to automate those processes that otherwise would have required a human to intervene and interrupt that, what we're talking about, that seamless experience, that great customer experience. So these are some of the things that can happen in real time, that quick scaling up or down of operations as the data is letting us know to do so.
Interesting. So Anton, back to you again. So how is technology enabling people to get the most out of their day, and what might a day in the life of an employee look like? Yeah,
I mean, it is coming back down to that personalisation, and the efficiency and how we're able to create some, heightened levels of productivity in the workplace. And the day in the life of a user, utilising Neurospace, really starts with us suggesting, a booking for them, suggesting a time for them to be in the workplace. And that suggestion, may have come in the way of some data inputs. And those data inputs could look like their meeting room booking. Say, for instance, they have a meeting room booking that day. There's 8 people in that meeting, 3 of which might be coming in remotely, and 4 of which are already booked to be in the workplace. And so the suggestion would be, pop into the workplace for that day as well. Be there with your colleagues, and that might also link up with the fact that it could be a Wednesday, it could be a Thursday, a day that is preferenced for them to be in the workplace. And of course, that on top of, understanding what their mode of travel is. So they public transport users, are they drivers? What does the traffic, what does weather look like? These other inputs allow us as well to suggest when and possibly when not to be in the workplace. It could even be that there's a situation where we really want to have more people in the workplace, but there's too many people. And so we're able to suggest co-working spaces to overflow into. And that could be a co-working space within the building itself. Essentially built for this exact situation where we have an overflow. So yes, I mean, it's a very personalised experience that we're going for with.
Quite predictive.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I assume, Max, there's some predictive and artificial intelligence you're looking at in the AV space as well.
Certainly are, and I think a lot of it is very similar to what we've seen already. I mean, I'll give an example of a number of years ago, we worked with a large financial organisation in Australia, and we were able to tell them when people weren't showing up to meeting rooms. And in your example, dropping that meeting room out of that booking state and making it more available, we released 25% more meeting rooms out of that process. And the interesting thing about it back then was that whilst it was definitely seen to be a success, but we weren't connecting then with the air conditioning or the other parts of the building to make that more of a complete experience for the client. So whilst to be honest, the sales case was there to buy the room booking system that we sold to them, the connections weren't quite there. Now we've got an ability to take a lot more data out of these systems and to do a lot more with them. We certainly are being asked these days to advise on how many people are showing up to meeting rooms. The example of somebody booking a boardroom, one person in that boardroom, an example, because they like that room. You can't stop that happening, but you can. But now with new technology, you can start reporting on it. You can start changing the way that people behave, and also making sure that they have an appropriate room booked for them, as an example. So, if your product, for example, is pushing people towards a certain place to work during the day, we can actually push them into the right meeting room, make sure they have the right platform to use. So now there's I suppose the maintenance and the resilience aspects of this are really key as well, because when you've travelled halfway across the city to go and sit in a meeting room, you really want to make sure that it works. And so the cloud tools that we're providing at the moment with the APIs to allow people to gather data around all of that is critical to all of that experience that we're trying to improve for people. Yeah.
So sounds like a lot to look forward to. So last question, given we're almost out of time, what makes you most excited about the future of the workplace from a technology perspective? And Anton.
Yeah. I think, the point raised before, Louise, I think that was you that mentioned, the fact that we've all come together here. Integrations, from our perspective, that's the most interesting and exciting prospect, being able to hook in and connect with sort of similar technologies and use that technology in order to create actions and outcomes. That's definitely, something that we're really excited about, because again, it creates the personalized experience and also assists businesses in their utilization planning and their spend and of course, it's a fun time.
Yeah. Max?
On a similar theme is that I think as an industry, our collective industries, we've had so much more potential than has been realised, and the commercial realities of, do I need all this data? What do I do with it? How do I connect this all together? Do I need that smart building? Well, the answer is yes, it is now, because people have realised that all of the data points that we're providing and all of the outcomes that we're providing are really valuable to an organisation. I find that really exciting, and moving into the future, that's going to be a key driving aspect in our real estate and property portfolios, rather than location or size of the building or those type of things. There are more different definable attributes to buildings that we're looking at in the future. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Great. Louise?
So I believe climate change is the biggest challenge facing our generation today, and buildings are responsible for 40% of global emissions. So we have an incredible opportunity in front of us to make a real impact through the smart, efficient management of buildings and real estate and infrastructure portfolios. So we can capitalise on that. The way we'll do that, what I think technology will do for this, if we look at how technology can support the whole life cycle of these assets, from design and build to operate and maintain, cutting waste and being able to reuse through that whole life cycle, improving the employee experience, saving energy and making portfolios more efficient to manage, requiring less people, again, in a time when we've got immense skills shortages. For me, that is the benefit where I think we'll see technology unlocking. So looking forward to having an impact on sustainability.
Has potential to have, an enormous positive impact. So I'm certainly looking forward to that as well. So thank you all for joining us today. It's an exciting time as we see technology converging to provide a more connected and seamless workplace experience. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and thank you for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.